Colorado is now adding a strange new identity option to their driver's licenses, Right-Wing News reports. Colorado has gone just as progressive as California and New York. They just added a gender X to their driver's licenses. No longer do people have to identify as either male or female. Colorado is doing this so they won't get sued. The state is also considering a third option for gender on birth certificates. LGBTQ advocates say this is crucial for transgender and non-binary people's daily lives. This is what the Denver Post has more to report on this cultural madness. Colorado residents who do not identify as male or female will be allowed to choose X as a symbol to represent their gender on their driver licenses when an emergency rule goes into effect this month. The change comes as state officials continue to grapple with policies that allow people who identify differently than their sex assigned at birth to alter their official documents, which LGBTQ advocates say is crucial for transgender and non-binary people's daily lives. The Colorado Department of Revenue, which oversees the Division of Motor Vehicles, decided to make the change effective November 30th after 2 court cases in which judges found in favor of Colorado people attempting to change their sex on government identification. The department needed to adopt a policy in line with those decisions to avoid the possibility of being sued. The department's executive director, Michael Hartman, said in an exclusive interview with the Denver Post. Hartman said, "This is an important step for the state of Colorado, that the state documents reflect our values. People are people, no matter their sex identification." The change not only will be personally affirming to people who identify other than male or female, it will reduce the discrimination non-binary people face with when their documents don't match their gender expression, said Daniel Ramos, executive director of One Colorado, a statewide LGBTQ advocacy organization. When the documents don't match, non-binary people are often forced to explain their identities or can be denied service, he said. It's an incredibly affirming process when a person's identification reflects their name and their gender. They no longer have the fear or anxiety of being rejected by a clerk or teller or anybody else, Ramos said. It's difficult to know how many Colorado residents identify as non-binary, which includes people who identify as no gender, more than one gender, or something other than male or female, Ramos said. The change to driver's licenses could help provide a better estimate. 20,850 adults in Colorado identify as transgender, an umbrella term for those who identify differently than their sex assigned at birth, which includes non-binary people. The addition of X to driver's licenses will be a fairly simple operational change and won't cost taxpayers any money, Hartman said. He says it's a pretty quick update to the system. Discussions about adding a third option to driver's licenses have been ongoing for years in the Joint ID Task Force created in 2013 by Governor John Hickenlooper, Hartman said. But the department decided to move forward the change after the U.S. District Court for Colorado ruled in September that the U.S. Department of State had to issue a passport to intersex Colorado resident Dana Zim, even if they refused to choose male or female on the application. Zim requested to use an X on their passport but was denied. Hartman also cited proposed changes the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment could make to policies about changing birth certificates to represent a person's sex identity that would include an X option as well. The changes followed a settlement of a lawsuit filed against the department by a minor who wished to change the sex listed on the birth certificate but had not undergone sex reassignment surgeries as current policies require. The Colorado Board of Health will vote on proposals to add a third gender option to birth certificates and dropping the surgery requirement on December 19. Alex Quintana, State Register and Director of Vital Records, said in an email. The changes would go into effect at the beginning of 2019 if the board votes in their favor and legislative channels approve the change, he said. In the wake of the court cases, the Division of Motor Vehicles needed to make a change to avoid a lawsuit. Quote, "Someone in the community might take that step if we don't take proactive steps," Hartman said. Applicants who want to use the X on their driver's licenses will have to complete a form and get a signature from a medical provider or mental health counselor, but are not required to be undergoing any hormonal treatment or surgeries. The new licenses would be fully compliant with the federal Real ID Act that sets standards for government-issued identification and would be valid in other states and in airports, Hartman said. 4 other states have already adopted a non-binary identifier on their driver's licenses. These are California, Oregon, Minnesota, Maine, and Washington, D.C. Oregon was the first to offer a third sex option when its Transportation Commission approved the rule change in June 2017. The change turned out to be very simple, David House, spokesman of Oregon Division of Motor Vehicles, said. As of November 1st, about 2,091 people in Oregon have a driver's license with an X on it, he said. House said he was not aware of any people who use X on their licenses who had difficulties traveling or using the ID outside the state. Oregon transportation officials briefly considered removing sex designations from driver's licenses entirely, House said, but found that the Real ID Act requires that a sex be recorded, though it does not specify how. In contrast to Colorado, Oregon does not require any certification from a medical provider for those who want to use X. People simply have to choose the option. We don't weigh people, we don't measure height, you self-certify that, House said. State officials received minimum pushback to the change. Only 12 of 83 people who submitted written or oral comments during approval process opposed the change. Since the rule went into effect July 1st, 2017, House has received only a few phone calls about the issue. He said it's pretty much dropped off people's radar. Once the Colorado emergency rule goes into effect, officials will begin the process of making it permanent. The emergency rule is effective for 120 days, Hartman said, though he could re-adopt it if the time limit expires before a permanent rule is made. Colorado legislators do not need to approve the change, he said. The Department of Revenue will hold public comment on the proposed change, though that meeting had not been scheduled as of Wednesday. People can also submit written comments via email, and department officials have already contacted law enforcement who said the change would not affect their ability to investigate crimes, Hartman said. So far, he hadn't heard any criticism of the plan, though it had not yet been publicized outside the ID task force. He says when it comes to rulemaking, we have a really significant focus on hearing from all different viewpoints. Kindly support my Patreon account, since that's the only way I can continue what you like seeing on this channel. Thank you. You'll find it in the description box below.